जिंदगी के कई मौसम अनुभव किया मैंने। हालात बदले, लोग बदले, अगर कुछ नहीं बदला तो बाबूजी की सिखाई हुई एक बात, वो कहते थे जब नींव मजबूत हो तो फिर चाहे वक्त के उतार चढ़ाव कैसे भी हो, हम उनका डट कर सामना करने में सक्षम होंगे। बिल्कुल इस पेड़ की तरह ऐसा ही एक अटूट रिश्ता जोड़ता है आपके साथ IDFC फर्स्ट बैंक। विश्वास, पारदर्शिता और सच्चाई का, क्योंकि इनको आपकी सफलता में अपनी जीत दिखती। मैं तो जुड़ चुका हूं इनके साथ, आप भी जुड़ जाइए ना। IDFC First Bank, always you first.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Outlook Business Leading Edge 2021, brought to you by IDFC First Bank. The topic for today's discussion is the future of online retail. As we all know, the pandemic has advanced digitization by a few years across all businesses, and retail, which has been disrupted over a few years now, the change has been underway. We can probably call it a realignment of sorts, where now we are trying to figure out what kind of business models will survive and thrive, vertical, horizontal, digital only, or some combination of digital and physical. To sharpen our understanding of how COVID-19 has redefined the retailing space in terms of technology and business strategy, we have three sharp minds: Amar, Nagaram, CEO, Myntra; Ambareesh, Murty, co-founder and CEO, Pepperfry; and Karan, Mohla, partner, Chiratae Ventures. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this discussion today. First question is to you, Amar. Can you just take us through how this pandemic has really changed online retail business, especially for a segment like yours, which is fashion, and how have you responded to these changes?
Thanks, Mahalakshmi, for having me on the show, and hello to my fellow panel members. The technology has always been the backbone of e-commerce company, and especially for Myntra, this has been at the forefront of every investment we made. 2020 in particular, very few scenarios or situations where I say thank you pandemic was because what pandemic did to the consumer behavior, especially with fashion online purchases. Tier 2, Tier 3 was little skeptical even in 2020 until pandemic happened. But as we went into a lockdown, when the access to a lot of essentials became a problem overnight, and a lot of people started trying, and I would say they were trying e-commerce for the first time in the first few months of unlock. What happened post that was how a player like Myntra was able to grab the opportunity and cater to the need state of the consumer. And one classic example, right? I mean, Metro Tier 1, when we look at fashion, when we look at our consumers' need state, people tend to fashion to stand out. Whereas in Tier 2, Tier 3, people try to blend in. This is a country of too many cultures, and this is one big differentiation between how we see fashion between broadly geographically. So for us to actually understand that and cater to that kind of need state and turning around our catalog in almost no time, given all the constraints we had, the global supply chain was disrupted. The brands were having problems getting brands on board. We invented our ways into the market. We were, in fact, one of the first platforms, if not the only platform at the scale at which we are operating, where we have close to 5,000 stores serving consumers through our platform. So during pandemic, there were stores which were serving consumers through the platform, even though there was no footfall in any of the stores. So there were many applied innovations, as we call it in Myntra, that we had to step in to cater to the consumer need state. And like I said, it was an opportunity that came our way and we grabbed it, and we're still trying to make it work for our consumers, because when the pandemic dies down, hopefully it dies down, people will go back to the previous way of life. So it's very important for a player like us to give more reasons for people to stick with us even after the pandemic ends. And that's where the new investments are going in. And that's where we're trying to bridge the gap between the offline and online experience working with the offline brands. So yeah, it's been a fantastic year for the business, but it also took us out of our comfort zone, even though we've been an e-commerce player from the beginning. And we're still looking forward to the kind of disruption that's in store for us.
Ambareesh, in your segment, what changed? I read one of your interviews saying in August, your sales were back to pre-COVID levels, and thereafter you've been galloping even more.
Yeah, so I mean, Amar mentioned this, the fact that e-commerce penetration shot through the roof, especially through the lockdown, was important. I think there were two things that I think further to that happened, especially in my category. One was the fact that all of us had spent a lot of time at home. And so therefore, things that we used to put up with earlier, let's say that slightly lumpy sofa, which we were okay with having, or of that particular lamp, which didn't just provide the perfect light. But once we spent a lot of time at home, we realized that that lumpy sofa wouldn't do, and that perfect light had to happen, especially given the fact that we were spending so much time at home. So therefore, our consciousness towards all the stuff that was in and around us, just scaled up rapidly, right? And that's something that I think is a great thing for my category, and it's something that benefited Pepperfry as a business substantially, and I think that's here to stay, right? Because just our consciousness on things around us, I think, is important. The second thing that I think was super important was so a lot of, if you look at our sector essentially, right? 90% of the sector is unorganized, which meant that folks used to get a lot of the stuff done at home of carpenters and stuff like that. Now, given the lockdown situations, etc., the comfort of having anybody walk into your home, most of the societies don't allow it. The comfort's reduced with consumers. Therefore, there's a trend towards buying ready-made stuff, even in furniture. And I think that's again a fairly good signal or a good sign for the category in general. And then, of course, there's the third one, which is that not all of our houses are equipped for working from home. A lot of us hadn't invested in appropriate seating, appropriate tables for working and so on. So work from home as a category went up big time. I think these are the three fundamental consumer changes that happened. There were two things that we did, and we went through a fairly sharp learning curve as things opened up. The first thing was that when things opened up, we wanted to be amongst the first supply chains out there up and running. I think it was it's a testament to what the Pepperfry team achieved, that we were one of the first supply chains up and running. And there's the benefit of the fact is that we own our own supply chain, and therefore even in a large box category such as furniture, we managed to be the first ones out there delivering to customers in the best possible manner. So that was one. The second was that our category is peculiar and our marketplace is peculiar in the sense that we work with a lot of MSMEs. Now, one of the things that I think we often don't realize is that the impact of the pandemic hasn't been on big businesses. The impact of the pandemic actually has been on small businesses in India. And so therefore, how through the course of a fairly massive upheaval, do you ensure that your business partners who are MSMEs, who are small enterprises, manage to get through the worst of it while still being able to service customers, have a business to sustain, was the challenge that we faced. And I think we did a lot of things to ensure that small manufacturers, small sellers do not get affected, courtesy all of the upheaval that happened with the pandemic. So I think these are two things: the fact that the supply chain got up and running fairly fast, and the second that we managed to let's just say shepherd our partners, our business partners, especially small enterprises, through the worst effects of the pandemic, are things that I think worked. We did well, and keeping in mind that there were consumer sentiment changes any which ways, things came back quite fast, and the rest hopefully is history.
Sure. One point to the one that the 3 points that you added on resurgence in demand. One, everybody is predicting now also that for the past 5 or 6 years, commercial real estate did very well, and now it's time for residential real estate to go up. So that should be good news for you as well.
No, it should. Especially, so there are two things that always affect us as an economy. One is discretionary spending, and the other is the advent of real estate, especially residential real estate. And the last few years haven't been that great on both these fronts. And one is hoping that turns around. Perhaps just the law of averages kicks in, and it's about time for that sector to come back in. So that will also help. Yeah.
Sure. So Karan, these two gentlemen have talked about their segments. Tell us a little more about what are really the big trends apart from contactless, because I think a lot has been said already, which you see as very enduring changes in terms of business model, in terms of thinking about economics, marketing, the next year penetration. What are the big things that stand out?
So, I think Amar and Ambareesh have covered a lot of the relevant points. So I'll try and touch upon some of the other nuances that we saw within, our consumer-facing portfolio. And I think there was maybe two clear things that kind of stood out. I think one was for some of the more mature companies in FirstCry and Lenskart, which are true omni-channel players. To be honest, in Lenskart's case, very offline first.
Correct.
It was a very big shift that they had to do in the middle and at the scale at which they are. And it was interesting, right? In some states, their iShops were allowed to be open. In some states, they were closed because somehow they were essential in some states and not essential in others.
Right.
Same with First Cry. So those anomalies, I think everybody had to deal with. But I think beyond that, what really kicked in was how the acceleration of digitization, right, for them as retailers, as brand owners, effectively needed to get done. Right, it was always sort of a gradual thing, but the pandemic kind of accelerated that in a very big way, and that was at scale. On the other side, when you see, some of the maybe companies that we invested in more recently over the past 3-4 years, there I think digital was always sort of the first way to hit the market. But what in some cases, what ended up happening was I think that the business model had to change because either supply chains were broken or shut down,
Right.
or they had to change the mix of the categories completely overnight, right? And not necessarily having the scale is a good and a bad thing. In this case, I think they had to be much more creative in terms of being able to reach out to customers, being able to educate while changing everything on the back end. So it required wholesale changes, both at sort of how you build the organization and how you sell the products while everything is shut down. And I think that is sort of my sort of lasting image from the lockdown period of March, April, May, because it was all happening virtually, right? And we were on. I think everybody was having these daily, weekly, which then became monthly calls, thankfully, on Zoom. But it was very, very stressful. And I don't mean this just for our portfolio. I think it would have been stressful for a lot of people. But I think the way in which a lot of those changes happened while customer preferences were evolving at the same time was fascinating to watch, just as somebody who's got a little bit of a slightly detached view to things, right? Because you're not in the middle of it. And that to me is, so contactless delivery, all of those things, I think are things which happened. And I think think of them almost as tools, right? Which were sort of needed to be built in. But the real infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, both from a company perspective, as well as from a consumer perspective, I think has changed quite dramatically. I stay away from making statements that everything will go digital or everything will go back. I think it has to be some mix of the two. And this year and probably 22 will kind of really tell us what's the longer term trend. But I think ultimately, in the business that both Ambareesh and Amar are, and a lot of our founders are, I think it's really one of the best places to be in general. Of course, we're broad tech investors, so we do a lot of B2B as well, and that's changed fundamentally. But for the purpose of this, this conversation, I think this is really, really probably post Geo one of the seminal turning points, right, for India as a digital economy. I think we're all in a very, very privileged position.
So, Amar, I come back to one of the points that you made about penetrating into tier 2 and tier 3, right? Now, one question which probably Karan, with his understanding of other businesses in this across segments, may also add to, is how does the economics of targeting the next level of customers really alter your business? So to put this in context, if you can tell us over the last 1 year, how much of your sales contribution really came from repeat customers versus how many were first-time users? And how is that economics really changing for you? And maybe we can take that forward with the other two gentlemen.
Sure. So actually, before I talk about economics, Mahalakshmi, what was very eye-opening for us in 2020 was our understanding of tier 2, tier 3 customers, especially in the context of fashion. In fact, during the lockdown, when we were not operational for 9 weeks, one of the things we launched on our Myntra property was Myntra Studio, where we put out a lot of content using the influencers. It was not a content created by Myntra. It was a content created for Myntra by influencers from their homes. And it actually served us two purposes. One, we stayed top of the mind for our consumers, even when we were not operational. Second, we also attracted a lot of new users coming from tier 2, tier 3 on how to use the stuff they already have at home. How do you put together things? and the kind of content they were searching for and the kind of content they were looking for, because a lot of influencers were also creating content from tier 2, tier 3.
Right.
So there was a learning that was happening on the platform. So when we opened up, we quickly realized there is a difference between how Metro Tier 1 looks at fashion and Tier 2, Tier 3 looks at fashion. But one more thing that also happened parallelly was how pandemic normalized the fashion needs across the geographies. Like comfort wear, loungewear became kind of an essential across geographies.
Right.
Ethnic wear, quite surprisingly, got a lot of traction in Metro Tier 1, which was not the case until 2020. People were more comfortable in ethnic wear at home, apparently, than any of the Western wear. And the loungewear and the comfort wear was going into Tier 2, Tier 3. Do-it-yourself beauty products were consistently going off the shelf across geographies. Kids is one category which did phenomenally well. In fact, kids on our platform grew over 100% in 2020 from previous years without us having to invest much into this category. So the reason why I'm saying this, there was a shift in consumer need state. There was a new learning that came onto the platform. So if you look at 2020 alone, 1 in 2 consumers came from tier 2, tier 3. And 1 in 3 consumers were new users to the platform. In fact, 2020, the biggest story for us has been the new user acquisition. Strictly talking about the numbers now, tier 2, tier 3 average basket size is still lower than Metro Tier 1. But since the share of tier 2, tier 3 is growing significantly on the platform, we have to, and in fact, we are in the process of rejigging our unit economics to make sure the tier 2, tier 3 works for us. In fact, one of the big steps we have done is we've started leveraging Flipkart's logistics, which is built for tier 2, tier 3. In fact, Flipkart serves in 29,700 pin codes in this country. So we're leveraging this network to make this economics work for us. This is not an opportunity we want to let go because of the constraints we have. Thanks to Flipkart and being part of the Flipkart group, we are able to jump on the opportunity and make it work for us.
Sure, absolutely. Is that becoming a challenge for you, Ambareesh, in your segment? What is your penetration into the next level, or you would continue to focus on tier 1, which itself has a long runway?
Yeah, so frankly speaking, the e-commerce penetrations, especially in furniture, are lower than they are in other categories such as compared to fashion, etc. So therefore, we do think that there's tons of headroom for growth even in tier 1 towns or metro towns. That said, 2 things happened from a small town perspective or a smaller town perspective, which I think are of value. The first is that, look, so we are an omni-channel business, right? So about 30% of the sales that we do prior to COVID happening used to be courtesy people who used to walk into Pepperfry studios across the country. And our thesis has always been that it's the same customer who could be on a laptop at some point in time, she could be on a mobile phone at another point in time, or walking in a mall or on a high street at a third point in time. And therefore, it's our duty as a brand to connect with her whichever way she wants to connect with us. So based on that thesis, we had built out an omni-channel business, and we are even today an inherently omni-channel business. One of the things that's happened is post these lockdown restrictions, etc., easing, even the footfalls into our stores have come back. Roughly, again, about 20% of our business is coming from customers who've walked into the store in the last 30 days. So in this context of the omni-channel business, 2 things happened from a smaller town perspective. One is that we realized that the demand for business opportunities in smaller towns, especially in the furniture category, just escalated big time. So for example, we get roughly about 3 requests a day from people in towns outside of metros to set up Pepperfry franchise outlets across those cities. Now, what that resulted in was suddenly this huge pipeline of franchising opportunities that opened up for the Pepperfry brand. I don't know whether, I don't know whether we've said this publicly, but saying it now, we opened 26 stores in the last 3 months. And that's all courtesy the fact that the Pepperfry franchising model, especially in non-metro towns, just took off because business opportunities are something that people are looking for there. From the standpoint of consumers, look, penetrations are, like I said, already there's a significant headroom for growth in metro towns. There is a huge opportunity which exists in non-metro towns. Those will keep improving for us, right? However, what is important is that this enabling ecosystem gets created. The moment you have franchisees who understand the local language, who understand the local consumer, who understand what sells in that particular market, and they becoming your partners, you basically have hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs who are now working on your behalf to set up great businesses for themselves across various parts of India's geography. And I think that was something that really took off for us through 2020.
As of last year, you had about 60 exclusive outlets, right?
So now 60 outlets. We had 60 outlets, 10 of which were franchisee at that point in time. Our franchisee program had just started. Today, we are now at about 80 odd. And out of which now the last 20, 25 have opened in the last 3 months.
So how does that alter your business proposition in terms of economics? When you bring in franchisee outlets, overall, does it make it better in terms of your economics?
No, so you got to look at it, I think, multilaterally, right? So it's the cost otherwise you would have incurred towards acquiring a customer, which is much lower when you have a presence in an omnichannel setup. Yeah, because it's, that builds trust with customers. Therefore, their ability to, or their willingness to buy increases, especially in a high involvement category such as furniture, where the average order values are high, the average ASP is high. So what it does is it actually reduces your cost of acquisition, and that's superbly beneficial. It also increases your average cart sizes, because the moment you have somebody walking into a Pepperfry studio, typically they don't just buy 2 pieces of furniture. I mean, they will make a cart and potentially change 5 or 6 pieces of furniture that they might have in their house. So it increases and it improves unit economics from that standpoint. But also you are paying a franchisee commission. Right.
Correct.
Therefore, there is a set off. In the balance, it works just as well as a business that you do online in a metro city.
Karan, how does it work for other businesses, especially Myntra, for example, is able to ride on Flipkart, as he suggested. For several other standalone businesses, is this larger penetration really coming at the cost of unit economics?
No, so I think Ambareesh gave a great sort of insight into how the franchisee model works for them. It's actually very, very similar for both FirstCry and Lenskart, right? But I think because all three of them, and actually Myntra too, is all four of them are sort of vertically focused platforms. I think each has to play to their particular strength, right? So let me give you, maybe I'll just share some examples. So FirstCry, I think what they've done is various things around building a proper platform around the commerce engine itself, right? And it didn't start now, it started a few years back. I think one of them was actually having partnerships with hospitals very early on in the days, where they would bring brands and get them to young parents sort of at the point of, not literally at the point of delivery, but literally a day or two after that. That's your introduction to FirstCry as a platform became quite early. So that's a program that's been running well. The other is obviously over time they've built a fairly large community of mothers, which are, the aim obviously is to get a lot of them to eventually transact with FirstCry, but you don't start a community platform like that. You build it for engagement, you build it for creating that trust, and you build it for understanding consumer insights, especially, not from sort of metros, but people who are, who have never bought anything besides diapers, right? If that, by the way, from a local chemist, right? In a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 town. So I think it's a longer customer journey that comes from that. But over time, the conversion, but the affinity, I think more important for that consumer to go from the community platform to a commerce platform becomes very organic, right? I think you have to be patient with that. So that's something else that FirstCry has done exceptionally well. And they're doing a few more things. They've been experimenting with a few more things in the last year or two. In the case of Lenskart, again, a few things. One is, we've all had this issue of how am I going to look when I try on a particular pair of glasses. So in the early days, they did this whole, try at home. They'll do send an optometrist to your house, do a test. Like Myntra did way back with clothes, they would send 5 pairs. So you try them on, give one back. And over time, they've also, improved and enhanced the technology in terms of how the look will be. You can't substitute the feel for a glass. I mean, there is I'm sure at some point somebody will figure that out, but there is no answer for that today, right? So there was a small acquisition they did of an Israeli firm, which really would help render the visual imagery of, what a proper 3D image would look like of, me buying glasses. So I think some of these are, incremental changes at the time, but they really bring exponential improvements over the longer course. So, offline, omni-channel, the franchising model is one. I think creating the right kind of partnerships with other people in the ecosystem is the third. Making it easier for the customer to sort of purchase, to try, to maybe even return, right? And I think Flipkart did this way back when, no questions asked, return. Everybody understood that was the way they had to build it. I'm talking about sort of 2012, 13, right? Very, very early days. Cash on delivery, something. So all of these are, innovations in a sense for, making it easier on the consumer side. While a lot of the stuff on the back end, right, around supply chain innovation, around warehousing, around just in time, drop shipment, stockist model, all of that, which I think everybody is doing today. But ultimately, from a consumer standpoint, all that doesn't matter, right? If I'm getting, and let's look at it from the eyes of somebody who's living in, let's say Muradabad or Dehradun. If North India is just easy for me to give examples, right? But for them to literally come on and try something for the first time, which is not a standard form factor, right? A T-shirt may be the most standard form factor, or a phone, electronic. But when you go a little bit deeper into a nuanced category, right? Like something for your babies, or something for your house, or a particular style, right? In fashion, you're not sure of both selection. You're not sure of, am I getting the best price? But that is now easier. And you're not sure, am I getting the right kind of, am I going to get what I see? And is it going to come to me, right? And I think all of those issues have been solved sort of on a step-by-step basis by, the two gentlemen here, their companies, and many, many others. But ultimately, I think it's about educating the customer, getting him or her comfortable, and depending on what you're selling, I think finding the right way to get to that customer again and again and again, because as we found, right, repeat customers over a period of time are really what builds long-term value. And that's true for any new business that we've invested in the last couple of years. We really look for, and that's why people make fun about investors asking for cohorts and retention, but that's really what's building a long-term value, at least in the early days, right? So those are the signals that you're really looking for. So, that's just sort of some of the things that I've seen work really, really well over the past few years.
Does that push the break-even numbers forward in the sense that, both the entrepreneurs as well as the investors have to be more patient?
I think quite differently. Not that we're not patient or impatient. One of the lessons that, I've seen over the last 11 years of doing this is, let's keep it specifically on commerce and retail. Is each generation of companies that start, right, want to be able to get to the right unit economics level sooner than the previous ones did, right? And as an investor, I think we're also trying to get to that level sooner, right? So something which we may have done, let's say Series C onwards, 5 years ago, right? You're actually now looking for that right after Series A, because we've all been through that journey where enough money has been spent on marketing, and spending money on marketing is not wrong. I think there is enough and more merit, and there's a lot more return that you see on it. But I think knowing early on whether it's working or whether it's failing is important. Because then you're not necessarily having to reinvent, number one. Number two, you know when to change things. And actually the pandemic was really, for some of the early companies, phenomenal, right? Because it forced you to stop, think, have some perspective, and go back. And so getting to, contribution margin positive very early on, getting to a point where you can build comfort on being marketing break even within a particular point in time. So okay, what do I need to do to be able to break even on this set of customers, right? Those kinds of metrics, those kinds of discussions at the board, I think happen sooner than they did maybe 3 years back. And I think this is a learning process for all of us. So, no, I wouldn't say we're patient more or less. I think it's just it's more, I think, understanding how the market is working a little bit better today.
Sure. Amar, so as far as Myntra is concerned, what is your strategy with respect to offline?
No, in fact, our strategy with offline has been that offline will continue to play the role of an experience center for us, not necessarily a distribution center. And this is something we offer as part of the suite that we give to all the exclusive international brands that come on board. In fact, one of the very less known facts is we run more than 40 stores across the country for different brands. And the way we have integrated these stores is very much into how the consumer experiences it on the app, and it's very seamless experience that we provide. In fact, that was a starting point for our omni-channel experience, which we extended it to other stores as well. So that plan is very much alive. In fact, we have gone into strategic partnerships with both the Arvind Group and the Aditya Birla Group, and more and more of their stores will also come on board. And we are hoping to create this a new retail experience for the consumers, and keeping the consumers at the center of this experience. Like, it should not matter where the consumer is buying from or where the consumer is discovering the product from. There are complementary stances online can do for offline and offline can do for online, and that's what we're actually working on making it possible.
Can you tell me a little more about it, and how do you convince these people? What is in it for them?
It's actually a very good question, and that's exactly the problem we're trying to solve. In fact, as Myntra, we're happy to be that online mall, where the brand affinity or the brand salience still stays alive, even on the online. I'll talk about the online first. I mean, today when you go buy from any brand, you don't remember which mall you bought it from, or you don't talk about the mall you bought it from. But end of the day, when you have to go buy the brand, you know which mall to go to. It becomes a muscle memory for you. And that's the role we want to play as Myntra, where we become an online mall. In fact, if you look at one of the recent product launches on Myntra, we launched M Mall, which is Myntra Mall, where every brand have their own online store on Myntra. We're probably the first platform in this country who's giving them a platform to express their ethos, convey to their consumers in the way they always wanted. So that barrier has already been crossed. In fact, we have close to 40 leading international brands already setting up stores on Myntra today. Now, coming to the offline thing, what we are working to do, in fact, pandemic has actually given this kind of shift, is when the stock was sitting in these stores during the unlock phase, when people were not that comfortable going to an offline store, we were able to move the inventory. So the brand salience still was kept alive because of this omni-channel integration we did. Now, extending those benefits, what we are doing is we want to be an infinite aisle in a store. I mean, there are many times you walk into a store, you like a style, but you don't find the right size. Don't want to lose that opportunity. So we are actually extending our infinite catalog right into the store, so people can buy from Myntra, get it delivered to you. So at the end of the day, the brand is still alive, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And from the consumer perspective, the consumer can always see these two channels working for the consumer rather than working against each other. Like, you buy something from Myntra and you have a size issue, you can go to the nearby store and return it. Or you can even better, which has been a behavior already established in the offline, you can go to an offline store and get it altered. You don't have to wait for a return and then get a different size. You can just do it in your nearby store. So that's how we're thinking. And thankfully, all the brand partners have been very, very encouraging to this kind of new retail experience, because end of the day, the consumer is the one who's going to benefit. And that's the best thing to happen, both from the brand perspective and from a retailer like Myntra perspective.
Sorry, one question on this, because as I see, I shop on Myntra. So if I put trousers, and it'll show me everything from a local legging for 400 rupees to Marks and Spencer to Gap and Mango, which is like 4,000, 5,000 rupees, right? So right now, there is no distinction between a low price band and a high price brand. So what is this new experience? I mean, is this going to alter the user interface in some way? Is it going to be completely different the way you're going to do it in future? How do you really create that brand distinction? Because right now it's not there on the platform.
The biggest investment that we have made, and which is already in progress, and this requires a lot of bit of learning on the consumer behavior, is basically how we understand you as a consumer. what is your brand affinity, what is your price affinity, what is your style affinity.
I definitely don't seem to be distinguishing between the 400 and the 4,000.
No,
That's why it shows me everything together.
No, it's not
Is
that.
that correct?
Our algorithm is also learning as we speak. It only gets better as you come more onto the property. So here is my shameless plug. Please keep coming to Myntra whenever you have time, so that we can learn more about you. But yeah, that's going to be the core of what we offer. See, we've also realized that one of the challenges e-commerce solved in this country was access to lot of brands, lot of styles. Now it has become a problem because too many options is also becoming a problem. So we are now applying a filter of personalization on top of it to see what are the relevant set of products that you're most likely to buy from, which will also take away a lot of discovery challenges for you, and will also help us understand the right kind of selection to put together for, in this case, for Mahalakshmi, right? So that's the first thing. Now, second thing is, how do we give the brands their space to contact Mahalakshmi? So if you go to M Mall today, every brand is talking their language. The next step to it is they will be talking their language to Mahalakshmi, not to everyone. So there's a bit of personalization coming from the brand aspect as well. And the third one is Myntra Studio, where we're putting together content from influencers. Today, the content is being made for the kind of user segmentations we have on the platform, and not necessarily at n equals 1. We ideally want to get to a level where you ask for a content, we create that content for you. What we are also creating is a network of influencers across the country. It's impossible for us to create content for everyone in this country. So we've onboarded the army of influencers who also have been longing for a very a relevant platform for them to showcase what they always talk about. I mean, there is a sense of gratification, and they're also monetizing this whole experience. So the influencers at the end of the day will also get, they will act as affiliates to the platform. They bring in sales, and they also make money out of this. So we're trying to create an ecosystem where the consumer, the brand, and the influencers come together on a platform like Myntra.
Ambareesh, is there any way that post-pandemic, is there a change in the way you look at customer acquisition spends? I mean, how much of it would go through social or any other form versus conventional stuff on ground? And post-pandemic, how has that spending really changed? The character of that spending, or any metric that you use, is it very ROI driven, or in what ways has it really changed?
Well, actually, strategically speaking, okay, our approach to customer acquisition, or our approach to building our business out, started with the brand. And our thesis was that we needed to be the starting point for a customer's purchase cycle of purchase journey related to furniture, online or offline. It was actually perfectly fine for us if we went the ending point. Now, obviously, our investors might have a different point of view on it, because we would like to be the ending point too. But we definitely wanted to be the starting point for the customer's purchase journey, which meant that organic traction or organic recall for the brand was something that we always sought to build. And that was what saw a lot of our investments through the early years of Pepperfry going into, right? And so therefore, television played a big role, offline media played a big role. And courtesy which, one of the things that, we're very proud of is the fact that close to 80% of our business today comes from customers who we don't need to pay any acquisition costs for. They come directly to www.pepperfry.com and they buy the product, and they have a great experience. So in the early, or the formative, let's say the first 5-6 years of our life, our emphasis on offline media, brand management, the creation of a great brand for furniture was something that was the core of our strategy. Now, after which, we continued to also expand the strategy to, and we look at various market frameworks, and therefore we look at markets which have low category development indexes. And if there are markets where the category development index is low, but the brand development index is high, you would find us actually disproportionately spending online, be that social or search, in those types of geographies or in those types of markets. Versus if there is a market where the category development index itself is low, then irrespective of what the brand development index for Pepperfry is, you would see us spending more offline, targeting customers in those geographical markets. So we follow all of these frameworks. These frameworks are what decide for us the split between online and offline spends, and within online, whether it's search or social, right? One of the things that happened through the pandemic, and I think this happened across businesses, and most of my colleagues here would figure that a version of it has happened with them. Two things I think happened from a brand standpoint, and we saw this operate at our marketplace, and I think it operated at an overall industry level. One is strong brands got stronger, and the second was that you had a clutch of direct-to-consumer brands, which fragmented the other extreme of the market. So you had at one extreme you had stronger brands getting stronger, at another extreme you had direct-to-consumer brands, a creation or a plethora of direct-to-consumer brands coming up, which started serving small niches of customers at the other extreme of this entire continuum. Now, in this context, effectively what resulted is, as strong brands got stronger, and this applied for Pepperfry, our traffic just went up, our customer acquisition costs came down. We did not need to spend that much money going and acquiring customers. Suddenly the ROI on customer acquisition improved substantially. And I think this is something you will find across e-commerce this year. You will find CACs coming down. You will find that, there was a question you'd asked Karan, I think, and Karan's answer was very relevant, which was that it's not necessary in a post-pandemic world that break-even points, etc., shift out. If anything, actually, break-even points might shift in a post-pandemic world. I mean, depending on the prioritization that a business does of whether it's profitability versus gung-ho only on growth. And CAC reductions, therefore marketing spend reductions, etc., are key levers in driving towards profitability, and that's something that we saw at Pepperfry, right? I mean, so today, for example, we are closer to profitability than we've ever been in our life. And yes, it's a function of top line, and it's a function of our overall spend stack changing, right? And that's something that you will notice across e-commerce businesses. One of the banes of India used to be that used to get a lot of visits, but you never used to get conversions, right? And I think that changed in 2020. Yeah.
Very beautifully put. I'm very glad you brought up this point about strong brands getting stronger. So Karan, has this led to sort of a polarization in terms of how the market is evolving?
I think Ambarish's point is quite valid, to be honest. I would also say that in certain segments where element of a forced digitization, right, which really happened, I think that gave rise to a lot of potential challenger brands also to come, and those necessarily had to be digital first. So you can call them D2C brands, you can call them digital first brands, whatever the nomenclature is. But I think, and we saw this across maybe certainly 2-3 categories, personal care, beauty. I think there where, again, maybe because of the forced nature of what everybody was put through, but also because I think a lot of these brands had, and these weren't brands which had just come up 6 months before the pandemic, right? They had also sorted their supply chain out. They also had very clear understanding of what the brand positioning should be, what the pricing should be. They had, gone through a lot of those frameworks. And like Ambareesh said, on the customer acquisition side, they'd also seen, okay, should we all go on Facebook? And the clear answer was no, because the only person that really benefits there is Facebook and Google, right? But you have to go through other and smarter ways of being able to get to your customer, a lot of which does tend to become, let's say, to build offline distribution, but then your discoverability online actually over time goes higher, right? And so certainly in these two categories, right, beauty and personal care, I think you can name probably 10 brands which became significantly stronger in the last 1 year. And then I think part of it is also because the brands that they were challenging were such large multinational or even Indian brands, which maybe necessarily were not able to move as quickly, during the period of the last 1 year. But I think equally importantly, like Ambareesh said, there are other categories where, we saw the incumbents, and those incumbents are also, companies which have really come up in the last 10 years, definitely become stronger because their overall proposition to a customer from a value perspective, right, from an availability perspective, and from a need perspective, at least on these three vectors, I think went up significantly, right? I think again, a takeaway from the pandemic and the period is there is an opportunity for challenger brands, maybe in a lot of categories to come up, but I think each one will be played differently. In some cases, having the right brand attributes makes a difference. In others, having the right distribution makes a difference. in some, having the right, the right kind of pricing and the right kind of distribution is also important. In some, all three are important, right? And in some, where you're actually creating new categories, I think there you have to have clearly all three, but you have to have a slightly longer term view of things, right? So it's a little bit dependent and very nuanced, to be honest. But at least that's the experience. That would be my takeaway for a few of the categories that we saw a little bit more deeply.
Sure. I have two questions. May I ask, or should I restrict to one, because I'm already seeing the time is over?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question is related to devices. I mean, is the jury out in terms of how has post-pandemic usage been with respect to desktop and apps? Has there been a significant change in user behavior?
I'll take the question.
Yeah.
We saw a spike during the initial weeks of lockdown, switching towards desktop, but then again, mobile came back to its previous usage levels.
Okay.
Our experience was very similar to Amar's.
The same thing?
Yeah.
So this is not like working from home, people are not browsing and shopping more from the desktop.
I think they're doing calls on the desktop and browsing on their phones.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. So the last question, Ambareesh, I know, all entrepreneurs are usually bullish, and especially I see that most new age entrepreneurs say competition is good, but I know that for most businessmen, competition is never good. And especially in your industry, if it's deep pocketed, well entrenched global players, it's a lot tougher. So now you've come up trumps so far. What is your strategy to guard and grow from here on?
I think we'll follow the same strategy we've always followed, which is know your customer really well, have products and services which are relevant to her, and deliver them with the best possible experience that you potentially can. I mean, and I think these three are, these might sound like tautologies, but if you stick to these three, you really don't need to worry about deep pockets and so on. I mean, you have a good business going, and I'll stick to these three.
Sure. More power to your elbow. Amar,
Thanks.
You're already on top. So which way do you go from there?
Well, we are talking about a market which is hardly 5% penetrated. So we have still a long way to go. And that's where we are investing our efforts into understanding the new user coming onto the platform and getting that understanding to n=1, like at every user level, and applying that kind of personalization on what we offer. And staying true to our vision, which is democratizing fashion using technology.
Sure. Karan, now your last word on what are the models that will thrive in future. What I mean is different segments, like slowly and steadily, we see a lot of categories creating leaders of their own away from the platforms, more and more verticals making their presence felt. And how do you see this shaping up over the next 3 years?
I'll take a cue from what Amar said, right? I think it's a very relevant point. A lot of us tend to forget this. When you look at digital commerce, it's just about 5% or so of overall retail, which itself is maybe 15% at best in terms of being organized, right? So we're really talking about 5% of a small part, which is anyway organized. So I think that the challenge and the opportunity, right, both are how do you get to that 20, 30, 40%, right, in a period of time, not when, we're talking about 5 generations from now, because then all of us would have missed out on something really, valuable. But how do you make that quantum leap happen in a short period of time? And the short answer is obviously it's not so straightforward. But I think the models and the platforms, that I think will succeed, will have a few things in common, right? I think one is, using and over-indexing on technology. And the further we go along, right? And it's a very sort of apple pie statement, but I truly mean that, because, we were fortunate enough to be investors in Myntra right from the early days. And it really helped us as investors really understand what it meant to, use technology back in 2009-10, when the e-commerce part of Myntra started. And that helped us understand into other companies we invested in, and the ones that we didn't have, were not able to. I think we understood how technology plays a crucial role, right? And the minute you are able to over-index on not just the front end, it's not just about marketing and, getting the customer, but it's also what you do again on the back end. And I think how that comes together is super important. I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is, understanding that, while we are in, I think Amar and Ambareesh will know this way better than me, but we're comprised of several small, fairly large countries, populous countries, right? And understanding how the different, I'm not talking about from a language or a cultural thing, but just from a spending power perspective, right? And understanding how each customer segment will behave, and being able to cater to their needs. And Pepperfry and Myntra have, I think, a great opportunity to do that because they're already leaders in their segments. Right? So for them, it's about going deeper, and I think that's true for 20 other companies like them, in different segments. That is. So I think understanding those nuances is probably the second thing, and then the third thing is, over time, how do you create different brands within your own platform, right? Because ultimately, if you are, both margins, loyalty, as well as, being able to create that stickiness will become high when you have your own brands or sub brands or whatever. Amazon's shown that at a global level. At least these three things, I think, will be key elements of, any model going forward. Maybe not all three at the same time, but certainly at scale, some element of all three will be required, right, for them to kind of get to a level where, they'll have the kind of success like Myntra and Pepperfry and others. So that's probably what I would look for and hope to see in coming years.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all three of you, Amar, Ambareesh, Karan. It was a really insightful discussion. I really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mahalakshmi. Thanks for having us.
And all the best for all three of you for the next year.
Thanks.
Thank you.